Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. As we move further into the month of July, I'm reminded of the paths we take each and every day, the choices we make, and sometimes we don't, we forget how much our choices really shape who we and where we may be going. There's a lot of external influences every single day. Sometimes our choices are not really our own choices, it's just the pressures that may be surrounding us. One of the choices that someone may need to make, especially as adults, is the hardest three words: "I need help." So, before we continue into, I just want to say we have a new guest. Her name is Alice Crawley. Is that correct?
That's right. That's
Thank
exactly
you.
right,
Thank
Crawley.
you
Yeah.
so much for coming on and just sharing your insight with us.
It's my pleasure. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and love the topic because I believe our choices, absolutely, they're actually one of the few things in the universe that we have control over, but they shape our entire reality and our future.
I totally agree. I just want to share before we dive into it. Disclaimer: if you're in the States, 988 is the Suicide Crisis Lifeline. Wherever you are around the world, find what resources are there. I work in the mental health field. I don't like reinventing the wheel, but whatever does work, whatever communities, I do encourage you to kind of remind yourself of them, connect with them, find out what's out there, make it very personal to you. Don't just get stuck on the general. What does work usually is something that I feel is something that for us we need to remember. I have a quote. People say it better than I do. Actually, it's kind of it's from Albert Einstein. I know I used another one before, but this came up to me. It says, peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." And to piggyback that, because I did mention this before, was Nelson Mandela. He said, "May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears." Those two kind of, I don't know. What comes to mind when you hear these two quotes?
And so, of course, to me, yes, I was reflecting deeply on that.
No
Um,
worries.
no, it really, really was, because ultimately, I mean, and Einstein is one of my favorite quantum specialists, and I consider myself a quantum specialist. I've worked in the field of, quantum mechanics and healing, but a writer, and I believe, Einstein as well as myself, whilst being grounded in, quantum. The quantum science and the neuroscience, I'm a spiritualist. Like I think
Yeah.
there's something like, and I really, that this, I mean, to me, Albert Einstein in this quote, this makes me think of Aikido and the art of Aikido, which was a martial art that I studied when I was in Japan for a number of years, and I wanted to go and go to the East and learn about the Eastern practices. And it's very much about, like my Aikido sensei would say to me, the minute that you start pushing against the universe, Alice, you've lost.
Mm-hmm.
The minute you start resisting against your opponent, you've lost. Like Aikido, it's all about, being able to it's shifting our internal state to create a different reality. And that's what Einstein understood. And he talked about, the closer that he got to not understanding the universe, the closer he got to God.
Yeah.
Just absolutely mind-blowing. But even with the that and the Nelson Mandela quote, I love that one, because the other one of my, to me, we always have a choice. One of the most powerful choices we have is what we focus on. And in any given situation, we can choose: do we want to focus on our hope, what it is that we want our reality to look like, or fear? Another little Japanese story, one of my favorite Japanese words is kiki, for the word chaos. And it's got two characters in it, one for danger and fear, and the other one for opportunity. And that's it. When we're going through chaos, when we're going through change, I mean, Nelson Mandela, what someone like a human being like that withstood is nothing compared to my first world challenges. But we all have our own challenges. And, I chat a bit about my story, but I definitely went down a very deep, dark rabbit hole, but as far and down as even at the bottom of that pit. And it was a very deep, dark pit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I sprung out of that through a conviction of staying focused on my intention with hope trusting, that the universe was going to shift my reality. And basically that's the game of it. That's the game to transforming our reality is
Yeah.
focusing on what we want with elevated emotion versus what we're afraid of or what we're anxious about. And that's not easy when we get triggered into a primal state of fear, right? This is the thing, people, it's one thing to talk about positive thinking. We need to learn to identify, okay, I've been triggered. I'm freaking out. How do I reconnect, calm myself down, and come back to what is it that I want to experience?
Yeah, and I feel a lot of those internal battles are internal. A lot of the hardest things for us to face is just looking at ourselves in the mirror, like actually having that talk. What is better for you, Alice? What is better for me? And actually asking that question, not saying, well, it's better to be, lose weight or be more fit. Why is that? Why that? Why is this? What is better for the individual is very personal, and that internal battle I've seen. And like with Albert Einstein, what I love about this quote, just to kind of piggyback, is just having information doesn't mean you have understanding.
Yes.
So we can have a lot of information. Understanding, it's there's more to it. It's like shaping your reality of how this information impacts you and why does it matter, and then moving further into that. And that I feel sometimes really shapes how our choices are, and it reflects on our own self-image. How do I? I was, as a faith leader, I remember just at times I just look at how people saw God or whatever it was that they were strong, and that how they felt God is how they treat everyone else. So if God was someone who's angry and very judgmental, they'll treat everyone around them. So the self-reflection, and I think that in itself can trigger a lot of our choices, but when we're able to have that self-reflection moment, it can actually get us closer to where we want. And like you said before, what we really want. Well, not what everyone else tells us what we want, not what the world tells us what we want. What is it? I feel, unfortunately, today I see a lot of walking commercials. A lot of people saying what they think they want, but they're not really what they want. This is what they want to control is uncertainty. But what we only can control is our choice and how we go about our lives. Yeah.
And that's it. And I mean, in a big, basically it is about our self-image, and how we see and view ourselves is at the very heart of it. Right. And that's what I learned on my journey. Like I went, and it wasn't just about my, overspending, and we'll get to all of that. Right. How I ended up there. I didn't decide to be a drug addict. I didn't decide to be, nobody decides that. That's male adaptive responses to pain and trauma. Right. And so, but that's a whole other conversation about once you get hooked into an addictive loop, I believe you lose choices. Once you're locked into the compulsion, it no longer becomes about a choice. It becomes about being hijacked by the inner addict or escape artist, right? So that's, again, another conversation. But how we feel about ourselves, it shifts everything, our reality and how we see everyone. I mean, I know for me, for years around the trauma I experienced, and I did therapy and all sorts of different spiritual programs and a lot of different things to make peace with it. And I would say what changed the game for me was when I really forgave myself at depth. That's when I was really able to let go of, it's like someone once, a spiritual mentor of mine said to me, Alice, if you want to keep somebody in prison because of all the bad things they've done, hold on to that. You've got to stay in prison there to guard them. Right. So, you get to a point where it's like, I need spiritual reprieve from this. I need to hand it over. But I don't want to just say, so, I mean, it could happen overnight, but for me, it was a big journey to shift how I think about myself. Yeah.
And, that journey, I always, working with clients and just you're on your own time. A lot of times people, there's this arbitrary time. They're like, well, I should have been here. I should have, this shouldn't, and a lot of times I agree, Alice. It's bad. And I agree that it's tough what you're going through, but a lot of times when we get to the moment of taking action towards steps, so they kind of retract it. This shouldn't be like this. Well, when is there ever time for that individual? They're always sometimes stuck on everything around them, but never themselves. When do they, whoever it is, John,
Mm.
Jake, or whoever, have time? I think Robert Fitz. Before I want to get into your story, he says it this way. It says, if you limit your choices only to what seems possible or reasonable, you disconnect yourself from what you truly want, and all that is left is a compromise. So a lot of times it's interesting how he kind of shares this thought. I remember last month is post traumatic stress awareness month, and one thing that was always haunting. I was in the military, but also this one quote. He said, I'm tired of these human gestures I have every day. I'm I'm still in Afghanistan. The idea is that he's disconnected. And that's an extreme case, but at the same time, we all can relate when we're not really where we're at. We're somewhere else,
Yes.
where we're somewhere like 10 years ago. It doesn't have to be war, it doesn't have to be battlefield trauma. It could be something else. And it can shape and dictate how we respond to relationships, how we avoid every single
Everything.
obstacle. So this quote kind of, I guess, for me speaks to that, and also the hard. Uh, it's easy for me to say, "Oh, remember we have choices," but it's harder than that, and that's why I think this topic is very important.
I would agree, and I think that this is where it it taps into whatever spiritual source, God, universe, cosmos, whatever that greater source is for
Mm-hmm.
you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about opening up the conversation around this, because
Yeah.
my experience with addiction was I did have to find a source greater than myself
Yeah.
to stay alive, right? And that's what's
Mm-hmm.
worked for millions of people. And to me, when I read this, that yes, indeed, limiting your choices to only what seems possible or reasonable, and it's even going so far as to saying, if again, something Einstein would talk about, that if we we can't solve the problem from the same state that we created it,
Yeah.
right? So this is where it becomes about, and I'm such a huge advocate, and I sometimes go, oh my God, it sounds cliche, someone who's been transformed by meditation, but trust me, it took a lot more than that. It took trips to rehab, lots of stuff, it took a lot for me to kind of get to the other side of it. But truly, this is all about, if you don't find a way to tap into what's possible from that infinite field of possibilities, which is what each and every one of us are made of, and we now have astrophysicists and medical scientists and stuff validating it. Like, there's no question around the science, and it amazes me, that we know this. We have the power to transcend. So if we're not, I think, in a nutshell, and to this point, and Robert Fritz, I would say, best case scenario left as a compromise. Worst case is what happens when people get derailed by addiction. And I spoke to somebody recently going through what I've been through a couple of times, needing to check into, to treatment, and there's this sense of like, what happened? I never meant, like, I didn't want for this to happen. And that's where, it's about getting a better understanding of that, disconnect. Like, when you disconnect from what you truly want and when you disconnect from who you really are, then you start to operate in a very limited, sphere of what's possible. Right. So I would say, yeah, compromise, but it can also, in fact, I would say it's quite detrimental when we disconnect from who we truly are.
Yeah, and I feel when we disconnect from who we truly are, there's then what are we doing? We're doing what others, or what we think, or every choice we make is really about how others see us. And a lot of times I ask clients, is it more important to seem like you're doing better or actually are doing better? And that question is, kind of cuts deep, because it sounds very basic, but most people, they're more concerned, and it's funny, they're more concerned about how they're appear, no matter what state they're in, no matter what they're struggling with. We're great at helping others, people, because when we're helping other people, what we're not doing, we're not really focusing on us at all. So a lot of times, like I said in the beginning, at least from my experience personally, and also my experience working in this field, is the hardest conversation is the one you have with yourself. The hardest conversation is that, there's a lot of wonderful people doing great things for people out there, helping. And I always kind of have a caution, like, when is there time for you? When is there time for you to kind of put the boundaries? You're one person. I feel like my experience in helping people is very humbling, because I know how much I can do and how much I can't do, and understanding those limits are very important.
I would agree, and I think it's great. I think it's fantastic that you raised it, Robert, because it's such an important one, and it's because I come from a very similar school of spiritual practices. As I say, in terms of spiritual-based recovery programs I've been in, it's all about connecting in love and service, right? And that service piece, it's so important, and it's life-saving and changing. It really is, and that it's so powerful, and we do need to, and I think it's getting to know ourselves and getting to know when we're feeling pushed, knowing the signs of burnout, when we're feeling agitated or anxious, really getting closer to, and this is, again, where I'm always such a big advocate of whatever that heart-mind coherence, meditation, connection, whatever your practices are, however you do it, it doesn't matter. However you plug into, source, it's so important to do that, because it recharges us. It helps reminds us of what's possible, but then it helps us, we need to create that. The way that, I love the analogy of, the oxygen mask as well, right? That there's, you have to put on your first your own oxygen mask first before you help a child or anyone else on the plane. And it is that principle. And like, it would be good if we could give ourselves even a more buffer than that. And it's not so much just an emergency. It's the same thing when someone's drowning. And I was a lifeguard and Coast Guard for years in Canada, right where I was born. And you learn that when someone's drowning, they become like 30 times as powerful. They become so strong, right? Because they're drowning. So you have to learn these defense techniques to get out, because you can't be taken down with them, and you can't save them if you're not strong and swimming strong in the water, So I think, in terms of, if I don't know what the perfect art is, but the practice that I take is really tapping in with myself in terms of how I'm feeling, my energy levels, mental, and just paying attention to the red flags in terms of if I'm burnt out, and setting those boundaries and setting them with love. Brené Brown says the most compassionate people on the planet have boundaries of steel, and it's true, because I have to do that, with clients, I've got lots of people I work with in different dimensions. Absolutely love it. But we have to set limits and if we're struggling to do that, to your point, Robert, this is one of the most important takeaways for anyone, is ask for help. Even if it's picking up the phone and going, I'm totally overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start. Great. You've called me, or you've called the hotline, or you've started the conversation. Great. And then from there, you can start to, because you won't. And that's with this point, and it's a great quote that you've pulled out here. It's true. And again, remembering, if we're in overwhelm or we're stressed or life is just taking hold, we may be giving too much and getting depleted. And so we need to find a way to refill our tank.
Yeah. And I feel like it's just because we have maybe some week, maybe we're fatigued, maybe external things, life events, things continue to change. So even Albert Einstein would say, the intelligence is really the ability to adapt to change. They're paraphrasing the idea that things will change. So being able to recognize when you do need to take maybe some break. I think what I love is like comedy. A lot of times people like comedy, because I feel, for me, it's kind of how you say, the humans are exceptional and unimpressive at the same time. It's one of those kind of caveats that allows us to kind of not take ourselves so seriously, but also you mentioned Aikido. I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for quite some time, and one thing I realized, I like is when you're fighting someone or when you're competing, it's more about you're not going to be awesome sauce at everything. if you know your weakness, it actually becomes a strength. If you know where you're limited, and I feel a lot of times in choices, and when you're at the very least, if you want to think about financially, if you think about your life as a long-term investment, you usually make wiser choices. If you think of it as a short-term, I need relief right away, it usually can become impulsive. But those are just general strokes that I want to mention. But before we really truly get in, I want to talk about you. You're new to the podcast. I love to give time. I don't want to. I like, especially with new guests, give you ample time to share what you want with those who are listening. What brought you to this field? What brought you to doing what you're doing today? A little bit, and plug away. We'll put all in the notes. People can find out what you're up to and anything else. So.
Oh, thank you, Robert. Well, really appreciate that. Now, a little caveat in advance, my apologies for the drilling. They're doing some construction upstairs at the apartment where I'm at. So apologies. It just, that's, yes, the universe just reminding us that the show must go on, So yes, that's life. So, and I would say that's probably a good intro. I think I was raised in a house and very much had that spirit from the get-go of the show must go on. My mom actually said she didn't, when I was born, I was kind of laughing and crying at the same time. There was just a sense of, from a very early from a very early point, was always walking this edge of comedy and tragedy, which is really what my story, I consider my story to be a dark comedy, and it's actually being made into here. Look, given that you've invited me, Robert, so I should have had it on hand. Here you go. Here's my book, On the Way to Wonderland. So, it's being made into a film, which is very exciting. And it's really about my journey down I took a very expensive, scenic, manic kind of journey around the world as a spiritual seeker. I spent time working with, in Mother Teresa's missionaries of charity in India. I went to Japan to study, Eastern religions and practices, and was scouring the earth for answers, but ultimately was very deeply unsettled within myself. And within later it was, when I had a very traumatic upbringing, so alcoholic, abusive family, multi-dimensional abuse. And it was, but I was that which is funny, that as I said, intuitive, I'm like, the show must go on. My mother was very much like that, and my family. And part of why I wanted to share my story is because I consider myself a self-confessed, highly functional and high-performing addict, and for people like me that grew up with, and again, it's not that I chose to be an addict. To me, whether you think of it as the inner addict or the inner escape artist, as I say, it was clear years later, when I got clean, that it was, response to pain and trauma. But I also had bipolar diagnosed in the mix, ADHD, which was later diagnosed. That was only about 5 or 6 years ago that was diagnosed, but had also always had a lot of emotional and mental health challenges. But at the same time, I kept tap dancing, I still continued to do, I went to university. That's when I got really hooked into prescription pills, was popping anti-anxiety medication, like M&Ms. Went to Japan, was always sort of the story of the Japanese welcome party, and it was sort of big stories and epic adventures, men expending, but it caught up to me. And I left I left Canada, my country of birth. I'd lived in Japan, went back there. I had racked up almost $185,000 in credit card debt. Well, it was $100,000 at that point. And I came to Australia to kind of get away from the debt and, start a clean new life, as a surfer chick, and romanticized it and everything. But as Ram Dass, once said, wherever you go, there you are. And there I was. on Coogee Beach with a drug-fueled hangover, and facing down the barrel of 185 US credit card debt. And I couldn't even see, like, getting through another day felt impossible. It was so dark. And it was, and the flip side of that is that, I mean, I got so desperate, and in many ways that, getting to that point of desperation, that's the best place you can be, because I was open to help. And it was a case of, that first phone call to somebody who met me for tea, the next day, and just completely shifted my life trajectory. And the conversation we had over tea was about choices, and realizing where I was at with, the patterns and behaviors and how I got down that rabbit hole. Now, it is a happy ending. So I did bounce back from all of that. And it started with that. I reached out for help. I felt so much shame, because the shame and the secrecy goes hand in hand with addiction. Nobody knew that how bad my drug, my boyfriend, now husband, had no idea, that I had a serious meth addiction, that I was maxing out my credit cards. Like, it was just such a shameful place to be. And it was what the turning point for me. And this is where, and I get emotional around this because I feel so passionate about it. It is that making that first call. Like, I spoke to someone a couple of days ago that just gets to that point of feeling desperate, to know that no matter how alone or cold or difficult it is, someone has been to a place there, that. And there's someone that gets it. And that, to me, is always the first important step. And that's what this friend who's now getting treatment, and I have these conversations every day, and I feel honored and privileged to have these conversations with people every day, because he was feeling, what erodes the self-esteem is the shame that goes with it. The reality is that nobody chooses to, I didn't show, you know what I mean? Yes. Okay. So very dysfunctional, unhealthy behaviors around the spending. But that, I mean, in terms of the research and the neuroscience they've done, the high from that, whether it's our phones and being digitally addicted and addicted to pokies, I mean, gambling addiction, that was actually one of the few addictions that wasn't part of my story. That is utterly devastating. Utterly devastating. I mean, that and the impact that gambling addiction and financial addictions have on people's lives. Because when you're in that dark hole, like, I thought I would never get, I'm like, how on earth, I'm earning $50,000 a year, how on earth do I start to make a change? And it started that first phone call and speaking to someone and being reminded, like I was saying, these quantum principles and learning about what they've known in the East, monks and Taoists and, religions have known for, have been around for millennia, those principles, in terms of the miracles that start to happen when we have that shift of consciousness and we tap into whatever it is, however it is we need to tap into, but we can't do it alone. We need help. And that's the key thing, and that's where I'm really wanting to open up and change the conversations around addictions for the 21st century, because I still think there's a lot of stigma and shame and secrecy, and it's no different than than any other mental or emotional health crisis manifestation. It's no different to it's like, you're not alone, you need help, you need treatment. So so that, as I said, I did come back from that. And now, as I said, I look at my life and I just think, how is this? I mean, I've always wanted this. I wanted to be able to, write my story and have it turned into a film. And it's so exciting, that's happening. But as I say, what really gets me out of bed every morning is having the opportunity to connect with people like you, people who may be listening, anybody that's at a point where, they're just thinking, if there's that sense of, this friend I spoke to recently of being hijacked, like I don't want to be here. And I agree with my philosophy is we're exactly where we need to be, no matter what, even if it's even if you're in a rabbit hole, you're where you need to be, and you're hearing this at the time you need to hear it. And you're every moment you have an opportunity to see it differently and go, okay, is now the moment that I'm going to reach out? Is now the moment that I'm going to admit to myself that I'm struggling? Is now the moment I'm going to say that I've had a few cracks at trying to do this myself and I can't? I need someone's help, and reaching out to somebody. And like you said, it doesn't matter what or who your trusted network is. I'm all about sharing the networks of networks. That's my mission, is, certainly in Australia, suicide is the leading cause of death for Australians aged 15 to 44, which is a pretty jarring statistic. That's it, it's overtaken cancer and heart disease, and I know that, through COVID, there's been a lot of big things we've all been through, and certainly addictions and self-harm and, people's suffering was on the rise. So, and as I said, and you'll have a few laughs. I promise you have a few laughs. And that's the whole thing, is that we've got to make it funny. Like we've got, it's not funny when you're in there and when you're in that dark place. And that's when you reach out to someone. But, even in, every conversation I've had with, and again, I'm getting emotional, but people, whether it's someone talking me off the ledge or me talking to somebody else, back down, we always in that same conversation have a big laugh about something, because we can't take it too actually it was Oscar Wilde. I know he's a bit of a controversial one to quote, but I loved what he said. He said, life is far too important to be taken seriously.
Yeah. I do feel that every day can't be a crisis. Every day can't be, every day can't be. Some days we're very productive. Some days we're not as productive. We're human, let's get, and at the same time, it's not just, you mentioned something interesting, remind me of Robin Williams. A lot of times when we think about Robin Williams, there's this one quote and it kind of stirs. I used to think that the worst thing in life is to end up alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is to end up with people who makes you feel alone. Perception's a funny thing. When I was in the military, I came out and I was, struggling. I had a lot of bitterness, talk about shame, a lot of bitterness going to support groups. I'm like, these people, I'm I'm 20 some years old. I'm like, I could never ask for help. I never really did, but these people it felt like I couldn't connect. And a lot of times, but the funny thing is, that barrier that was kind of developed and produced by myself. I don't know these people, and I'm making assumptions to make it more harder for me to connect. Eventually, yes, I found that that's what I love doing. Which kind of prompted me getting into the mental health field, because I was doing support groups. I was doing things in the community that way. I was also doing other things as a faith-based leader, but really I just love connecting. I love connecting with the people. It never really mattered what they were going through. It never really shook me, whether it's addiction, whether it was some positive symptom, whether it's schizophrenia, whatever it may be. All I see is a person struggling, a person who's sad, someone who just needs help. And a lot of times if it's unfamiliar, a lot of times we try to distance ourselves or kind of make a lot of reasons. But one thing, they're still people. They still have names, still have families. They still have all this stuff. So a lot of times I try to humanize the whole concept when it comes to mental health and addiction. It's not, we can point fingers all we want, but all it takes is one person close to us to be suffering, or someone who you lose someone who's close. It becomes more real. And I feel...
100%. And Robin Williams, probably one of the most talented, addicts and alcoholics. He grappled horribly with it, as well as challenges with mental health. And he and I love this quote of his. I mean, I love anything that pretty much everything that came out of Robin Williams' mouth. He was one of my, comedic heroes, one of my flat out saviors. I was saying to this friend actually that, in rehab, one of the things that got me through it was watching videos, and he would talk about, this is what brilliant. He would talk about his stories, about before he had to go to rehab, and even the cat when he was on so much. Anyway, even the cat was at the door of the suitcase going, look, I'm out of here, can't do this anymore. And, and we connect through laughter, and we connect. And you're absolutely right. It's basically, we all have hopes. We all have fears. We all have, we all want to be the best we want to be. I honestly, that to me, I consider it the universal principle of forgiveness, which is that everybody is doing the best they can with the resources they have at the time. Everybody is. With that doesn't mean that there's not people doing a terrible job or things that need to be, need to be adjusted and reprimanded. I'm not saying that, but ultimately just coming in with that open, like you said, having that open mind and intention. And I mean, it saved my life when it came to spiritual based recovery and connecting with communities. And as I said, I'm all about just opening it up so there's more communities of people connecting, because there's nothing like what happens when there's that connection at depth, human to human. It really does change and save lives.
Yeah, and I feel one word I've been using that I feel gets a bad rap is accountability. I feel accountability is only a bad word when you're not in the right environment, when you're not really seeing. Accountability is just for me, accountability is a safe word when you're in the safe place, when you have people and you have an idea of that you want to better yourself, when you understand that your life is just a series of steps. What's the best thing you could do today? Well, I don't want to get out of my bed, I feel horrible. Well, maybe let's just try to see if you could go take a shower. Let's see if you could go to the bathroom. Whatever that is, that little step is maybe all you do, but that's you. You're not on anyone else's time. And when I think about just how short sometimes life is, a lot of times you hear these conversations in hospice when people are almost about to. It never was about some title they had. It never was about whatever accolade. It's all about the people around them, the people they miss. People are not there, so it's sad that it takes that much time or that kind of clarity for us to realize the most important thing is not the mistakes. The mistakes are things that if you look at it a different way, it's what we learn from, and then if we're able to kind of release ourselves and take the time and self-reflection to understand that this will be a process. So sometimes I may have struggles. I can ask for help. I'm just like, I'm a human being. And, like you said, unfortunately, the world, if sometimes it's hard when you feel that you're different, and if you're not able to kind of connect or find, like in the beginning I said, find what helps, what resources. It can be very lonely, like Robin Williams. You could be around thousands of people and like, oh, he must be happy, he must feel connected, and that's not necessarily true. Another we talk about choices. One thing about choices is you cannot make progress without making the decision. A lot, and this is just kind of symbolic to the idea of choices. If you're making no choice, that's a choice in itself. And I think the last thing I want to mention with Jim Rohn, he says it doesn't matter which side of the fence you get off on. Sometimes what matters most is getting off. You can't make progress without making decisions. Kind of emphasizing the idea when you talk about choices, it's actually making a choice. Sometimes we can be we can say, well, nothing worked before, I'm just going to sit here. That in itself is a choice. And I feel that, when we talk about the whole scope of choices and the idea of choice, it's not absent of oneself. Does that make sense? It's the choice. It's really, it's it's really centered and revolving around what does better look for. Like I said in the beginning, what does it being better mean for you? What does that and taking the time of kind of unwrapping that. Now, one of the most telling stories I remember, I had a client, the whole family wanted the person to be independent. Independence is a big thing. Find him, like they had some money, so they're like gonna assist him getting a place, which is wonderful. But he was really, he was struggling through medication management. Those people in mental health field or people who have struggled with mental health, finding the right balance, whether you believe in medication works for you, doesn't work for everyone. Either way, he was not feeling well. And he told me, and said, it's great that they're helping me. He lost shame that he needs the help. But at the same time, he wasn't that. I'm like, why are you not? Are you excited to get your own place? And the person said, I'm just going to be miserable somewhere else. That's it. I'm just going to be miserable. And so the priority is not that the place, not the idea was bad, but he never really voiced or gave the indication of what would be better for him at that point. And not the whole housing issue is a whole nother monster. But a lot of times when we think about just better, sometimes we kind of push on what we think are better for others onto them, and if they don't if they aren't able or don't feel like they have a choice, sometimes that could be problematic to their care, and they're getting progressing in recovery. So I just wanted to mention that real quick.
No, I would agree with that, and I think that's it. It's fine. It's finding the balance, and I would say the other thing I wanted to say on the choice thing, I guess because it's been a big part of my journey and dancing with addictions and mental health challenges and stuff, is even if you're in that space and feeling conflicted around a choice, is surrendering it and offering it up to whatever that is, and actually asking for God, help me to make the best choice for myself here. That's what, just help make it really clear to me, help make the best choice really clear to me, ask for clarification. So that to me, that asking for help, it's that, and again, it's whatever you identify with or connect with. But, and for me, early in my journey, I really had no idea what that is, but that's, it's those spiritual practices are really important for, just helping to regulate emotionally and mentally as well.
Yeah. And I feel, a lot of times when we get to some sense of understanding, or a lot of times, at least I find, we want to give back. We want to share what we can, maybe help someone. An old philosopher, Aristotle, said, those who know do, those who understand teach. So a lot of times understanding takes years. A lot of times there's a lot of things that, and I think part of recovery is not just the information of it, not the step-by-step, but the understanding of it, understanding what recovery means to you, and passing on what may be helpful for someone else. And I just want to ask you before we kind of wrap things up, but also first, I didn't ask before. I apologize. Where can people listen to this? If they want to get a copy of her book, where would they?
Of course. Okay. Thank you for checking in on that. So actually, if you go to alicecrawley.com, you'll see that you can get it from my online store there. So feel free to order it from there. But you can find me. I'm on Facebook. You can check out Alice TV on YouTube. But all of my resources and the book and the link for the online bookstore is at alicecrawley.com. So appreciate you checking in on that. And I do love sharing my story with people, because as I say, it really, I think, the challenges with addictions and also like multidimensional addictions. And I think there's a lot in there, right? We're looking at like at scale, some real challenges. It's so intrinsically linked with the mental and emotional health issues. And it's the right time to be opening up the conversation. And as I said, I wanted to share my story and have a laugh about it because, hopefully my trip down the rabbit hole can help somebody else to maybe avoid some of those things. But again, to also to read that and go, okay, wow, yeah, I'm not alone. I did some crazy stuff. And by the way, flashing up Aristotle, I was an so basically my master's was in Aristotelian metaphysics, of all things. So metaphysics, as through the lens of Aristotle. So agreed on the those who know do, and those who understand teach. And to me, the next step of that is, when we do teach and we do pass it on, and we share these beautiful stories and the tools, the techniques, the strategies that have helped us with recovery, whatever avenue, if it's financial, drug, alcohol, gambling, sex, love, it's all in, food. Oh my God, that's a whole chapter in terms of food, body image, and again, intrinsically linked to self-harm. So all of that, there are solutions. There's spiritual solutions, there's the and the connection of community, and connecting with the right community, as I say, just saves and changes lives. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug that in there.
No problem. And I just want to ask you this one question right before your final thoughts, but what has helped you and what has not helped you? And you don't have to say, you mentioned a lot of your story, but what has helped you during these hardest decisions in your life? You mentioned a little bit of that. What was helpful for you to make that decision? What was not helpful?
It's a great question. And actually, there was a couple of things. One, I would say what really helped me was getting clear on what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And getting, when I was, as I said, and I had the multiple rock bottoms, there was one in a hospital in Japan as well. So I had a few of them, but getting to those points, those low ebbs where it's like, okay, so this is not within acceptable limits, and I want to go up from here. And even though it might have been difficult and painful at the time, waking up in a psych unit strapped to a bed, going, what is going on? It can only go up from there. And that's why I like to have a laugh about it as well, because it's like, I've had those crazy low ebbs, but it's like, I know what I don't want. I want to feel independent. I want to be, so getting really clear on what I wanted, but also why I wanted it. And I think the key thing, like tapping into what's really helped me with making those tough decisions, like checking into rehab, just even going through the process of what I'd call a black belt in acceptance when you lose someone you love, too soon, or, that grieving process, or anything like that, is it is knowing that you don't need to do it. What's helped me is having people around me that I can connect with and be really honest with, really authentic with, totally vulnerable, to say, The one other thing that I would call out on this, though, is that, as time has gone on, and as my connection, to source and my intuition has gotten a lot stronger, I've found it's been more helpful to go within to seek clarity on decisions versus seeking a lot of external input and validation. And that's been a seasoning thing.
I can see that. For me, I just some of it's just simply kind of I could be disappointed in someone's interpretation, because then I have to explain a lot more, and then what am I doing? So a lot of times, like I said, the hardest conversations, but sometimes the most rewarding ones, at least from my experience, are the internal ones. You lean towards, and it's never, I say it's prudent to get advice even if you don't agree with it. I think you learn a lot from people you don't agree with, and you kind
Absolutely.
of So I think there should never be barriers to that in regards to understanding. Understanding means that you, at least from my experience, is that you don't you don't just listen to people who think like you. Listen to every point of view, so you get
Agree.
more of a rounded view on it. Final thoughts for you, and thank you for coming, sharing with those who are listening. Any final thoughts you want to share with those listening today?
Well, thank you so much for those who've stayed and listened in. It's, as I say, an honor and a privilege to be here. I love talking about, the power of the choices we have. I think, remembering that we always have a choice on what we choose to focus on. So no matter where you're at in your journey or on your path, you can choose to see it as a springing off point to something absolutely amazing. Or you can choose to get caught in the fear and the anxiety of what's happening. And as I say, it's not a linear path and it's not always easy, but remembering you always have a choice in terms of how you choose it. So no matter where you're at, you've got a choice from moment to moment, and no matter what's happened in the moment before it, because that's the thing, we get hooked into the regret and the shame and that, but I've come this far. It doesn't matter. No matter what's happened the moment before this one, you have a fresh moment right now. And you have a choice and you have an opportunity to do it differently.
I also want to just say, I was thinking about this podcast, and before I actually had events at a church and had people share their story of recovery. One thing that was interesting was it was 2019. This is how dated. Right before the pandemic, and one of my friends said, "Oh, you should do a podcast." I'm like, I don't know. One thing I said to myself was, my whole thing was, I don't have the equipment. We could sell ourselves. I don't have this or that or this. But one thing I always wanted to always do with this podcast, and also with Revive Ministries, is continue the dialogue, continue the conversation.
Yes.
The most haunting thing, I guess, the most concerning thing is when everything's quiet. I want us to continue to kind of dive in, to understand more, to listen more, to grow more, to find what hope is out there. Listen, and I just want to say I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, and I appreciate all my guests. It's not easy to do this, but at the same time, it's also very rewarding, and I think you can understand that. I just want to say thank you again for being on here.
Well, thank you so much. It's honestly, it's what a wonderful opportunity to connect with you, a new network of people, and if there's something, some sort of nugget, some words that have landed or resonated, to me, that's that's absolute gold. So it's been wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me, and absolutely echo the sentiment. And I love what you're doing, Robert. You're doing amazing work. It's fantastic. You're continuing the conversation because it has never been more important as it is now, just given the emotional and mental financial crisis, certainly Australia and other places in the world face into. We have to keep talking.
Yes,
we really do. So, and as I said, and that to me, through all my darkest hours, that's what's helped me. Having someone on a podcast or someone on the other end of the phone going, you know what? You're so not alone. I got you. We've got each other. We're not in this alone. Yeah.
I just want to say to those listening, remember, ReviveMinistryFL.com is the website, and this is goodbye from Revive Ministry Podcast. Leave you this last quote. I love this quote. I'm going to let it sit for a little. It's from John A. Shedd. He says, "Ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are built for."
I love that.